Growing up in a small town, hunting was more than just a hobby. It was a rite of passage. By the time I was 16, I could handle a rifle better than most adults, and there was no thrill quite like tracking a deer through the woods and bringing it home. My father always said hunting taught us patience, respect for nature, and the weight of responsibility. Years passed, and hunting became a solo venture for me. I had moved away for work, but would often return to my hometown for the hunting season. On this particular trip, however, I decided to explore new ground, a vast wooded area 2 hours north. I had heard rumors about how game was plentiful there, and the allure was too strong to resist. I packed up my gear and headed out early one chilly morning. The drive was peaceful, a thick layer of fog blanketing the forests on either side of the lonely road. Upon arrival, I was immediately taken aback by the dense woods and the haunting silence, save for the occasional rustling of leaves. The first couple of hours were uneventful, but as the day progressed, I noticed something peculiar. No animal tracks, no calls of birds, an unusual stillness. Chalking it up to unfamiliar territory, I pressed on, hoping to spot a deer or even just a rabbit. It was around midday when I stumbled upon a makeshift campsite, tattered tents, discarded cans, and clothes strewn about. But what really caught my attention were the photographs. They were scattered around, some pinned to trees while others lay on the ground. Pictures of families, children playing in parks, couples, all seemingly taken without their knowledge. A sense of unease settled over me. Who would have such pictures? Before I could ponder further, a sharp rustling from a nearby bush startled me. Cautiously, I approached, rifle in hand, ready to face a wild animal. Instead, out stepped a man, ragged and dirty, with a wild look in his eyes. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. He stared at me, eyes darting around, not speaking. Then he pointed toward the deeper part of the woods. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. I tightened my grip on the rifle, my instincts screaming at me to leave. "What is this place?" He hesitated, then whispered, "It's where they watch." Confused, I pressed on. "Who watches?" "The hunters," he murmured. "But not your kind." Before I could ask more, a distant shout echoed, and the man's eyes widened in fear. "Go, now," he urged, pushing me away. I didn't need any more prompting. I ran, heart pounding, every rustle and crack amplifying my fear. I felt watched, pursued. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. The woods, which once seemed so inviting, now felt like a labyrinth designed to trap me. After what felt like hours, I reached a clearing and saw the most terrifying sight. Several men dressed in camouflaged gear, their faces painted with dark streaks. But these weren't any hunters I recognized. They held not rifles, but crossbows and knives. At the center of the clearing was a wooden board with pictures attached. Pictures of people just like the ones at the campsite. And there, pinned in the middle, was a new photograph. A picture of me taken from a distance earlier that day. Realization dawned. This was their sport, their hunt. I was the prey. Hiding behind a tree, I weighed my options. Going back meant certain capture, but going forward was unknown territory. My father's words rang in my ears, teaching me the weight of responsibility. I had to get out, not just for myself, but to warn others. Using every hunting skill I'd learned over the years, I moved stealthily, avoiding open areas, masking my tracks, and using the wind to my advantage. Every so often I'd hear voices, taunts, distant yet persistent. As night fell, my chances of remaining hidden increased. I reached a ridge that overlooked a road, my potential escape. But between the road and me were open grounds, a dangerous proposition. Taking a deep breath, I decided to risk it, sprinting toward freedom. Just as the road was mere meters away, a sharp pain pierced my leg. I tumbled, looking back to see a crossbow bolt embedded in my calf. The hunters were close, their silhouettes visible against the moonlight, their laughter echoing with malice. Dragging myself, pain searing through me, I made it to the road just as a truck approached. Frantically waving it down, I was met with the concerned face of an older man. "Hunters!" I gasped, pointing back. He nodded grimly, helping me in. "I've heard of them. Never thought I'd see the day." As we drove away, the last thing I saw were the hunters, standing at the edge of the woods, watching. Their game had escaped, but the message was clear. They were out there, turning the hunters into the hunted. To this day, I've never returned to those woods. The chilling memories of that day serve as a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators walk on two legs, and somewhere out there, in an unknown forest, hunt continues. I've always found solace in the woods. The serene hush, the cool shade, and the thrill of the hunt made it my sanctuary. A seasoned hunter, I've tracked animals all over the state, but nothing prepared me for that autumn day in the dense forest of Walker's Hollow. Walker's Hollow was a patch of dense woods on the outskirts of town. It had been a forbidden place since my childhood, with tales of strange disappearances and rumors of a cult that existed decades ago. As an adult, and with a hefty dose of skepticism, I disregarded the stories as mere legends and was enticed by the allure of untouched hunting grounds. On that fateful day, with my rifle slung over my shoulder and the early morning fog surrounding me, I ventured deep into the hollow. Hours felt like minutes, and before I knew it, I had strayed farther than I intended. The familiar sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves began to mix with something more eerie, a distant chant. My senses sharpened instantly, attributing it to perhaps a group of hikers or campers. As I continued, I stumbled upon a clearing where the source of the sound became evident. A circle of hooded figures, about a dozen of them, stood around a massive stone altar. At its center was an ornate box, inlaid with symbols I'd never seen before. As they chanted, one of them opened the box, releasing a sound so chilling that the air itself seemed to freeze. It was a symphony of agonized voices, echoing a torment beyond imagination. Hidden behind a large tree, I fought the primal urge to flee, telling myself that they were just a group performing some weird ritual. But my blood turned cold when the group dispersed, and two of them remained behind. They spoke in hushed tones, but my hunter's ears picked up their words. "It knows we are here. It grows restless. The sacrifice will be made tomorrow. It will satiate its hunger." My heart raced, and I accidentally snapped a twig beneath my foot. Their heads jerked in my direction, their eyes searching. Panicking, I retreated slowly, hoping the dense foliage would mask my escape. But fortune wasn't on my side. As I treaded back, I heard the rustle of footsteps. The whispers grew louder, punctuated with an urgency that made my skin crawl. "He has seen us. He has heard the echo." The forest became a maze. Every turn I took felt like a step deeper into an inescapable trap. It was then that I stumbled into an old hunting cabin, its wood rotting and windows shattered. Without a second thought, I hid inside, crouching beneath a broken window. Hours seemed like days, and just when I began to feel that I had evaded them, a shadow cast on the cabin's wall made my heart sink. The whispers were right outside. It was here. I can feel its presence. I too heard the echo. It will come for him now. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving me in pitch darkness. Only the soft glow of the moon illuminated the interior of the cabin. And then, it happened. From the ornate box's direction, those tormented voices started again, but this time they called out to me. My name echoed through the trees, distorted and chilling. The words of the hooded figures rang in my ears. It will come for him. I decided to risk it all and dashed out from my hideout, sprinting towards what I hoped was the way out. But the forest had changed. Trees twisted in grotesque forms, the paths turned into spirals, and the echoing voices surrounded me, growing louder with every step. At the break of dawn, with sheer will and adrenaline, I found myself at the edge of Walker's Hollow. Exhausted, I collapsed at the foot of the entrance sign, relief washing over me. Returning home, I locked every door and window, pulling the curtains tight. The day's events replayed in my mind, leaving me restless. I tried to convince myself that it was just a vivid nightmare, a result of the legends I'd heard. That night, as I tried to find sleep, the silence of my room was broken. A soft whisper, almost imperceptible, brushed past my ear. "You heard the echo." I shot up, scanning the dark corners of my room, and there, by the foot of my bed, stood a hooded figure, the moonlight revealing an ornate box clutched in its hand. Remembering that day, every time I close my eyes, I hear the whispers, the tormented voices echoing my name. Some say it's madness. Others believe it's the curse of Walker's Hollow. All I know is once you've heard the echo, it never truly leaves you. When people ask me why I don't hunt anymore, I usually change the subject. It's easier than revisiting that dark afternoon, the memory of which still sends shivers down my spine. Growing up in Alaska, hunting was a family tradition. The thrill of the chase, the strategy, and of course the camaraderie were all deeply rooted in our heritage. Every year, as the leaves turned golden and crisp, my brothers and I would gear up for hunting season. One year, my younger brother Mark couldn't make it due to his work commitments. My older brother, Alex, had moved to the East Coast, so I decided to go solo. It was an opportunity to test my skills, relying solely on my own instincts. I ventured deeper into the Alaskan wilderness than ever before, hoping to find untouched territories teeming with game. Days blurred together as I trekked through the dense forest, setting up camp in clearings. On the 5th day, as dawn's first light painted the sky, I stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin. It looked like it hadn't been used in decades. Its wooden panels were weathered, windows broken, and the door hanging off its hinges. Curiosity piqued, I decided to explore. Inside, the place was desolate, save for an old wooden table in the center. On it, there were carved markings resembling some sort of game score. One side had tallies, and the other side had animal symbols. Deer, rabbit, bear, and others I couldn't recognize. But it was the last symbol that made my heart race, a crude carving of a man. Shaking off an uneasy feeling, I left the cabin, chalking it up to old hunting tallies or perhaps a child's imagination. I continued my journey, finding a good spot to camp for the night. As dusk settled, I set up a small fire and roasted some game. As the flames danced, the sound of snapping twigs alerted me. I gripped my rifle, scanning the perimeter of my camp. But there was nothing, just the silent, watchful forest. I eventually fell into an uneasy sleep but was jolted awake by the sensation of being watched. The fire had died down to mere embers. In the dim light, I could see figures moving stealthily around my campsite. Human figures. Panicking, I grabbed my rifle and aimed a warning shot into the air. The figures froze. "Who are you? What do you want?" I shouted. A gravelly voice responded, "You're in our territory." Another voice chuckled, "And you're the game." Terrified, I bolted from my camp, plunging into the forest's darkness. I could hear them chasing after me, their laughs echoing hauntingly. The old cabin's markings flashed in my mind. They weren't just hunting animals, they were hunting people. I was being hunted. I ran until my lungs burned, using every hunting trick I knew to cover my tracks and mislead them. But they were skilled, always just a few steps behind. Hours seemed to stretch endlessly, but dawn was approaching. I knew I had to find a hiding spot or risk being caught in daylight. I stumbled upon a steep cliff with a river below. Taking a calculated risk, I jumped. The cold water was a harsh awakening, but it did its job. The swift current carried me far from my pursuers. When I finally managed to get to the riverbank, I was miles away from where I had jumped and, more importantly, safe for the moment. Exhausted, I sought refuge in a nearby cave and tried to make sense of the night's events. I realized my hunt was their twisted game. The tallies in the cabin, a scorecard of their deranged sport. I spent the day in the cave, nursing my wounds and waiting for nightfall. When darkness settled again, I started my journey back to civilization, avoiding open trails and always staying alert. After what felt like an eternity, I finally reached the outskirts of my town. The safety of home was overwhelming, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. Even in my own house, every shadow, every creak sent me into high alert. I reported the incident to the local authorities. They conducted a search but found no trace of the hunters or the old cabin. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. The police chalked it up to an urban legend, saying every town had its tales of ghost hunters and such. But I knew better. Weeks turned into months, and life gradually returned to normal. Yet every time I ventured near the woods, I felt their eyes on me. One evening, a package arrived at my doorstep, no sender, no note. Inside was a crudely carved wooden piece, a figure of a man resembling the symbol in the old cabin. I never went back into those woods. The tallies in the cabin haunt my dreams, reminding me of the game and the hunters who still lurk in the shadows, waiting for their next prey. I had escaped once, but the chilling realization remains. In their twisted game, I am forever the hunted.